As I bring in a guest, a now familiar face to you, Mark Schnapp, a former federal prosecutor in Miami, the Southern District of Florida, a longtime criminal defense lawyer for many years, and well attuned to what's going on. Sir, fundamentally, you have a president saying it's a sad day for America. This is a persecution of a political opponent, and talked about how he was leading Biden by a lot. He continues to maintain, I believe that I won the 2020 election. How do you convict somebody when they have that belief? And indeed, the first page of the indictment, the second page, the defendant had a right, this was in the indictment, has a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even to claim falsely that there had been outcome determinative fraud. In other words, that the outcome had been affected by fraud. Given that, how do you prosecute him?
Well, what you're really saying is, or what he's saying is, I have a First Amendment right to say what I want, even if it's a lie. But he's actually saying I've had an honest belief that I won the election. How do you prosecute him? Well, that's not what the charges are. The charges are that he took steps to fraudulently overturn the election by, among other things, spreading these lies, by causing people to try to interfere with Mike Pence's certification of the election, to interfere with people's right to vote. And so you have a right to speak, but you don't have a right to speak fraudulently. You don't have a right to, that's when you can't do that.
He's going to argue that his alleged co-conspirators, that people close to him, lawyers who weren't named, but we know that a number of them include Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, John Eastman, and others, said, hey, we were backing your claim. I was listening to my lawyers. Then I want to go to the piece about what his own internal team, including the vice president of the United States at the time, said. But again, can't he say, hey, people like Rudy Giuliani said I had a fight here. People like Sidney Powell said I had a fight here.
Well, the interesting thing about Sidney Powell is that the indictment said that he said that she was crazy.
Right.
That being said, but he does have Rudy Giuliani, who at the time people believed to be a credible person. He has John Eastman, who is a former dean of a law school and a constitutional scholar, who is alleged to have authored a memo and a plan to approach Vice President Pence. So he will obviously argue advice of counsel, as well as his free speech rights, a combination of the two.
And Mark, it seems, though, as we listen to lawyers, but certainly want your take as a former federal prosecutor, that the possible weakness that will be troublesome for him to defend with his lawyer, John Lauro, who you have professional experience with, we'll talk about that later, is that he knew it was a lie, the prosecutors will allege, because the indictment goes on to point out that his own vice president told the defendant he saw no evidence of fraud, that senior leaders of the Justice Department, including Bill Barr, his Republican-appointed attorney general, said the various allegations of fraud unsupported, that his national intelligence director said the same thing, that his cybersecurity expert said the same thing, and in fact said it was the most secure election in American history, and was fired days later. He had been appointed by President Trump. Is that fundamentally going to be the prosecution case, that you had your own people in many positions who told you, and you knew, despite what you wanted to have happen, that you knew from a prosecution point of view that it was an absolute lie, and then went on allegedly to commit fraud and obstruction to try and simply ignore that and turn the election your way?
Yes, I mean, including also Mike Pence, who told them, look, I can't do this. The Constitution does not allow me to refuse to certify an election. And I think he may wind up being one of the, if not the strongest witness against Donald Trump.
That's your star witness in the whole case, Mike Pence, right?
I think so, sure.
Talk just a little more about that. I mean, he refused to not certify the election. There will be allegations that he felt threatened. There's been documentation of that as the case rise and fall before that jury on the credibility of Mike Pence's, former vice president's, testimony against the man he served for 4 years.
Well, I think he's certainly one of the most important, but Mike Pence is not the only person who told them, I can't act to refuse to certify an election. And this also happened in some of the state jurisdictions that are in the indictment. So I think it rises and falls not only on Mike Pence, but I think on the number of people who told him, look, you lost. And you can't interfere with the results of this election, ultimately, which is what Mike Pence says.
Mark Schnapp, former federal prosecutor from Miami, we'll have you rejoin us a little later. We thank you for your early insights.